The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. And this time we are at the Durian Heat with Grace, and we have invited someone to our studio to talk about certain issues that's going around in ASEAN, and also to discuss more on the coming up summit, which is ASEAN Summit. And his name is Jerald Joseph, who is the chair of ASEAN People's Forum 2015. So let's say good morning to him. Hello.
Morning. Hi. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. So before we get on to more focused topic later on regarding human rights, when it comes to human rights, I want to ask you, is ASEAN really serious about these issues?
Wow. Straight to the point in the morning. Okay,
right.
That's good. I think it's on paper.
Right.
ASEAN keeps referring to human rights. Even the last summit, there was a Kuala Lumpur declaration of a people-centric, people-centered ASEAN that has language on respect for human rights, respect for justice, and so when you look at that, you say, "Wow, this is not bad," because this is what we've been asking for all along, and what happened in the actual implementation, and that's where I think we are not confident.
Right.
Because we've had an ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission. So that's the best proof that we have something on human rights in the ASEAN framework.
But how about in terms of the follow-up after all those documents were released, and then, well, those are the things that, of course, the People's Forum have been asking for.
Yeah.
But how about the follow-ups or any actions taken after that?
Well, I think we are now looking for a change of style, track, movement in ASEAN.
Style track, okay.
Yeah, because this language is not new. They've been talking about it for many years. But this summit, the 27th summit, there will be the launch of the ASEAN community. So we're asking, what is this community? Would it give meaning to all these documents? And I think you asked the right question. So what? There's been statements after statements after statements issued, no?
Yeah.
And even this time it's good. It's called the Kuala Lumpur Declaration on a People-Oriented, People-Centered ASEAN. And I just want to pick the first sentence of one of its paragraphs. Continue to promote the principles of democracy, rule of law and good governance, social justice, as well as to promote and protect human rights and respect for fundamental freedom. So we say, wow, this is what we've been fighting for, right?
Exactly. But that comes with a lot of questions at the same time.
Exactly. So how can you put it on paper and then you don't allow that power for that promotion and protection of human rights to exist? And I think you can't even just put the money, set up a commission, Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission, and not give it the teeth that it's needed. I think that's where I think civil society and many people are able to catch ASEAN governments at its show, at its game, and demand for something more. So we are now, in one sense, again guessing.
Right.
Because the ASEAN government set out this high-level task force to review the vision. So it's called the Post-2015 ASEAN Community Vision. And they're going to launch that also in November.
Right.
But we have no clue how good, how bad, and that actually again speaks to the flaws of a process of trying to integrate a final document without discussing with various stakeholders.
So you haven't even gotten a hint of this?
No, we've not seen draft 0, draft 1, draft 2, nothing. All we've been given a chance is to actually be invited to a dialogue in the Malaysian NGO with the chair, Datuk Sukimbi, in April last year.
Okay.
But that's a long time ago,
For sure.
And then the other countries, some of the CSOs were also invited similarly by their rep to give input. But giving input is one, but then interacting with a draft document is very important for us to give input. So we've been trying to impress upon our chair, which is the Malaysian woman, Datuk Sukimbi, to actually, maybe 2 months ago, invite groups for a feedback to a draft, so that when we see it in November, we will not be overly shocked or overly excited.
Of course. I mean, of course, that comes with expectations, that what you want to hear from them, as well as to be able to send the voices that you've been discussing as well. And it looks like the bridge between perhaps the People's Forum and the high authorities or the government is still sort of ongoing process. It's still there, but we don't see it prominently yet.
That's, I think, a good summary. They use stakeholders language. They say interact with civil society, but yet it's, in one sense, it's quite symbolic,
Right.
and it also subject to the host country of that of a event. So, for example, this year, Malaysia being the host for the 26th summit, when we organized the ASEAN People's Forum, our engagement with the Foreign Ministry of Malaysia was surprisingly good since last year, and we had very good interaction. We were able to share information. That's quite an exceptional experience, and I hope that it must be common practice both in Malaysia and elsewhere, not just because of chairmanship
and also
process.
be consistent.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think then you ask the question, will that be common practice of governance vis-a-vis engagement with civil society? Do we get invited to the ASEAN ministerial meeting?
All right.
Do we actually get invited to have a dialogue with sectoral bodies, education ministers, trade ministers, which is where all the real nuts and bolts are discussed. And civil society has a claim to share its view, you know. And I don't think it's the same civil society who will go for all meetings, because we also have expertise, you know. So maybe the trade segment, there'll be another set of NGOs going, but that kind of engagement is still not common practice, and I'm asking why. Why would you leave out a segment of people who could give you feedback or critical input? Because you finally still have the power to decide whatever you want as governments, you know.
That is very true.
Yeah, but even if the inability or the fear of wanting to open up that small door or window for civil society to interact with you actually goes to prove that ASEAN still has a long way in embracing its people as the center of ASEAN. So I think the rhetoric of a people-centered ASEAN it sounds good, you know, for any leader to give a speech.
For sure, yeah. It sounds also very promising.
Yeah, but also I think the challenge is for Malaysia as host and ASEAN as the body that is going to celebrate the ASEAN community must seriously change its understanding of governance, that governments are not the center of ASEAN. It must be the 550 million or 600 million people who's actually going to drive a successful ASEAN.
Well, when it comes to human rights, we've heard a lot of issues in Southeast Asia for sure, and People's Forum have covered a lot of issues as well and been discussing until now. So could you highlight some of the human rights issues that's been going on in ASEAN? Of course, you mentioned about the communication flow between the government and the civil society here, but before that, the human rights here, it's been going on for some time, years and years. And the first thing that comes in my mind when I think of human rights is Rohingyas issues and all those minorities in Southeast Asia, how they are not treated fairly, mainly from the government and also certain classes in the society. So could you explain your thoughts as well as highlight some of the issues?
I think it's not difficult to find issues. Right. And this region has been plagued by many, many serious human rights concerns. And you brought out a good example. After the last ASEAN summit, then the boat people crisis of the Rohingyas thrown around came to light. And then we
also saw how the oldest nation reacted towards this issue.
Correct, yeah. So then you ask the question, where is that ASEAN who's supposed to respond? So this is just one issue. We haven't gone through the list.
Yes.
And so the boat people actually speaks to cross-border issues because there's no more possibility of one country saying, okay, you stay out of my business. This is my country.
Right.
So I will handle it. And that's been the ASEAN drawback. Many ASEAN governments say that's the strength of ASEAN because ASEAN has been stable because of non-interference policy. But in this modern world, can you actually say people's issues are confined by borders? The boat people issue proved it beyond any doubt.
Correct.
That people, because of economic needs, because of greed, because of syndicates, criminal syndicates,
right,
who have no respect for such ideas as borders and consensus and non-interference, have been exploiting minorities and people to the hilt.
Yep.
And then what's ASEAN's response? It just shows its difficulty in coming to a consensus because you just need one country to disagree and there's almost like a veto. You know,
Yes.
I mean, there's no veto language in the ASEAN document, but de facto it's a veto. If absolute consensus cannot be reached, you just need one country to disagree,
Right.
and that agreement falls
yeah.
apart. So that's one issue, the cross-border migration issue. And then we always ask the question, how do we handle the root causes of this economic desperation and the possibility that criminal syndicates can get away so easily? I mean, so it's a mix between poverty, lack of recognition of identity, so vulnerability increases.
Right.
Yeah. So where do they go for support and help? Can they go to Aisha, the Human Rights Commission, and ask for, hey, I'm Rohingya, I don't know what to do? No, they can't. There's no email to send a complaint mechanism to Aisha yet.
Right.
So then you say, okay, boat people is the people, but that's not new. Boat people is what we saw on TV, the terrible images of trafficking,
Correct.
of people. But if we go back the last 20, 30 years, this region has been a hotbed of cross-border migration exploitation. So workers are crossing borders because some countries like Malaysia has got better economic prospects, so they're crossing to get money. Singapore, they're crossing to get money. What happens to them when they come here? Again, underpaid. When they're undocumented, so that's it. You get stopped on the road by any enforcement unit.
And sometimes their passports are confiscated.
Confiscated. They are threatened, and it's just sad that while we celebrate this new ASEAN, this issues of common people which is affecting the neighbor. So now the question is the responsibility of the people of ASEAN belongs to whom? So if an Indonesian worker is in Malaysia or a Myanmar worker is in Malaysia, isn't these two people citizens of ASEAN? Shouldn't this country government host, although it's not a Malaysian citizen, feel a kind of joint responsibility for this ASEAN community?
That's a very good point. Yes, for
so,
sure.
So this is the concept of ASEAN community that I'm hoping to hear when the ASEAN leaders launch the ASEAN community. It cannot be a symbolic community that I'm really for one, and yet when you come to my country you don't dare do anything funny because I'll kick you out, or I will not give you a salary commensurate with the salaries of the local people. This is just two examples of cross-border migration. But of course, before I go to the other issues of human rights, I think in our statement, the disappearance of Dr. Sombat, who was a civil society leader in another forum called the Asia-Europe People's Forum, AEPF. And after organizing it, he disappeared. And he still disappeared almost 3 years now, So civil society has put only one particular case by name. And of course governments, don't like any naming. But you cannot not name a victim with in order to speak to it directly. And all we've been asking is information, what's happening to this person. Although I'm Malaysian and Dr. Sombat, I've not met him, I have no clue who he is, But when you read the story, this is one of us in the region, and that's ASEAN community. So civil society has been already crossing borders on people's issue for years. You know, it doesn't really matter if the migrant worker is exploited here or Cambodia or Vietnam. It's still a worker, and he's still a person with dignity. And we have a duty to speak up for this person.
So we haven't heard as a ASEAN voice regarding, when it comes to these issues yet.
Not from the governments.
Right.
From time to time they try to, but so the both people forced because it was global attention. Yeah. And it forced ASEAN. So in that sense, I was very happy. I was very sad for the incident, and I don't think it's resolved. There's still trafficking happening, but it exposed so much of corruption, so much of criminality that could get away, and so much of desperation that trafficking could continue. You know. So Malaysian government, Indonesian government, and a few other governments push for that, summit of sorts and a discussion. I think it was good because for the first time they are actually disagreeing with their own principle of non-interference.
Right.
Because Myanmar say the Arakan people is my people. The others I don't know who they are. They are stateless and they're not. But at least some governments say we need to talk about it. In a public space and in an ASEAN framework or intergovernmental
which
framework.
Is very necessary indeed.
Which is common practice. That's what I can't understand. ASEAN plays a different diplomatic game when they come home to Southeast Asia. But they are subject to the same international diplomatic rules when the same governments are sitting at the UN, the Security Council and other forums where they cannot play, I'm sorry, you cannot talk about my country, but everybody talks about everybody's countries in the interest of a common framework of rights, climate change, sustainable development.
Yes.
So we are wondering why does ASEAN play this two-track? It speaks openly elsewhere, but here it keeps silent because of the sacrosanct, very old traditional idea of non-interference, which is a post-Cold War mentality or the US military invasion. But that's over. This new world where I'm now, as I'm talking to you, I could be texting to my Indonesian colleague in a human rights NGO, say Contrast, finding out what's happening in Papua. So we're already communicating, and cross-border issues are being discussed as fast as that. And you may say, hey, I need help. Yesterday I got an email from Singapore colleague CSO about the death penalty of one of those convicted, and the appeal process has gone, and they're writing to get people to explain, to get more support and help. So what is? That's a criminal death penalty, nothing to do with Malaysia, but we cannot say that. We are connected by history, by geography, but more importantly because we are people of a region and we respect that if something can happen across the border, it can also happen to me.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, before we continue our conversation on human rights, Jerald, let's take a short break and we'll come back to talk about more issues and Southeast Asia. So stay tuned.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. And I'm still with Jerald Joseph, who is the chair of ASEAN People's Forum. And we've been talking about all those human rights issues in Southeast Asia. So let's continue our conversation, Jerald. So what are the issues that you would love to highlight at the Durian Heat?
Well, the list, as I was saying earlier, is a long list.
Of course.
I don't know if this program is too short. But I just I'll just pick up. This was, I think you know that during the last summit, they always have this interface with civil society. So this time the interface also happened in April, and 10 civil society met 10 government. So I read out this statement as on our behalf as the opening statement. So I'll just read one segment which I read out.
Yes, please do.
So this speaks to the issue. So it speaks about we remain concerned about inequality that continues to rise despite the promise of ASEAN regional integration. So it's not that is getting better.
Yeah.
That inequality is increasing. We are worried with disappearance
Right.
of human rights defenders.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Sombat was one of them,
Yep.
plus many others, without information accountability. So the question of information, right to information accountability is a big question.
Yep.
Death penalty executions being
course.
accelerated, and that time I don't know whether you remember Indonesia, there was Mary Jane and a
Yes.
few, about
Yes.
15 people were on
Yeah.
on death row. So
And in fact, recently there is one Malaysian lady who got caught in Vietnam because of the drug. Yes.
yeah.
And then that also will lead to death penalty finally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are not saying that we don't handle the drug
Mhm.
problem, but we are saying that it needs to be handled.
Yes.
But death penalty is not decreasing the drug problem,
Mm.
So, and death penalty is an affront to right to life, and we need to find a new way,
Mhm.
So we spoke about unmitigated free trade agreements, the TTPA, which is now almost ready to be signed, I don't know. That is a big concern because what rights are protected, what are not protected, becomes a big question. No? Widespread corruption. And I think this just now before the break we spoke about the boat people. You asked
Yes,
about
exactly.
that. And what's the background? How is it possible that we have death camps in our borders in Malaysia? It was exposed
Yes.
that there's mass graves and stuff like that.
That's very disturbing.
Yes, exactly. So how is it that there are thousands and thousands of security forces on our side, Malaysia? There must be on the Thai side also. How can people be moving around so easily? So how is it that lack of professionalism or the super space for corruption to easily happen, has that contributed to closing one or two eyes to these death camps, So I think that's our common connection
Yes,
in
right.
in ASEAN,
All right.
Corruption is still very high in most of the countries. So that's one, and that for me is a link with poverty, escalating poverty, peace processes on the verge of collapse, South Mindanao, South Philippines, South Thailand. So peace, conflict issue still a big issue. Growth of extremism in the name of religions that
yes.
continue to be bred, and that's a big thing. And I think this is something we need to demand of governments. You can't say you're fighting extremism, yet you grow that thought and notion of extremist views and allow groups to speak them or spew them. Like in Malaysia, I think yesterday's day before yesterday's Star Paper, I saw on the front page 3 states they arrested a few
Right.
guys, So
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's good. So my question is, the arrest is needed, the stop of extremism is needed, but on the other hand, you're actually allowing the Islamic officials, some of the ministers, some groups with extremist viewpoints to say
On certain things, right?
about Islam,
Yeah.
and promote the notion that this concept of Islam is under attack. We are under siege, and we must be wary of the non-believers. So then you grow a culture of an extreme viewpoint that it's us against them.
Right.
Then why wouldn't young people want to jump into the bandwagon of the IS? Because they feel like everybody is an enemy, and that's the branding of the IS. They're smart. They know that if we put a black and white choice. So I think governments have to take responsibility for even that space of promoting such thought and rhetoric. So Malaysia is one example, I think, which is dangerous. But just on the newspaper one, I'm still wondering, you're a media person, why do they cover the faces of the terrorists or the extremists who are arrested?
I think it's the protection wise of the families of them or the friends of them.
But for me, it sounds like it's protecting them because you need to know who's the bad guy in order not to interact with them. But if you don't show the faces, every other country, the first day in Australia they arrest the person's face. Yeah,
yes.
So you need to know what's the connection, and you need to be fearful of these people,
right,
and not to be friends with them again. But by covering the face, you're actually doing them a service. So I'm wondering what kind of style of protection if you're trying to protect the identity. You know?
Well, that's very good point. But then when it comes to media, it plays differently in different countries. And of course, if you talk about Malaysia, we have a lot of restrictions in the media.
Yeah, but there's no restriction on exposing opposition leader who brought to jail. So I really don't believe.
There's no way that we can hide that person anyways.
So then my point. No, I understand other criminal matters like that I can understand. But this is about the fight against the violent extremists, you know, and we want society to know that there's these people from this who are dangerous, and you know whoever's connected to them, because you wouldn't know that person could have been your friend the last 10 years.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because without the face you would never know. There's no name, no face. So why are you protecting them? But this is something for I need to get advice from you, who's the expert on media. So that's one issue. Development,
right.
Land issues, exploitation, housing problems in the city, the growth of slums, and what do? Sell the land to developer, take it away. Indigenous people, land issues. You mentioned the stateless people like the Rohingya. A big issue, the quality of democracy and multi-party system. And this is in Myanmar's election is coming up
very
soon, and we look forward to a change. Malaysia suffers a terrible electoral practice, you know, which is not free and fair, you know. But yet we try to speak as if we are true democracy. We are not. Singapore neither is a true democracy. Whenever the ruling party keeps winning every time from independence, something is wrong. Ask any kid and they'll know, hey, how come that's happening, you know? So I think we need to tackle that. Multi-party systems in Laos and Vietnam, is that a reality? Now Thailand also, military has taken over. So the head of states cannot come and cross arms and smile for a photo when in their backyards they're not serious about bringing about true democracy, like the standards, minimum standards universally accepted. So police brutality continues, death in custody, then discrimination on ethnicity, religious, sexual orientation, gender discrimination, gender identity. That's also a big issue, which is a minority, the LGBTIQ community. Just because they are different, they have a different way of living life and orientation, but who are we, the majority, to decide what they should be or should not be, But because of power, the majority always tries to decide what direction.
And also here the religion plays a really big role.
Cultural, religion, when it's in the hands of the politicians, which is when it's religion in power, is problematic. Religion not in power has been very compassionate to allow all people in the history, But religion when it's in power, then it's dangerous. Climate change becomes a big issue also, and I know the big conferences is coming up, and I think climate change, then we need to talk about the haze. So I don't know whether the haze is an issue that unites ASEAN or disunites ASEAN, because
it's a very popular topic,
because the sharing of bad air among us, we are all breathing the same bad air. In one sense we are one community, but the inability to stop
this air pollution.
Such air pollution from one country passing on to the others and having serious economic impact, health impact. So people are asking, where's the rights? Where's my human right? When one country cannot stop? I mean, if it's exceptional circumstances, I think people are kind and people can understand. If it happens once every 10 years, I don't think there'll be anger. People say, okay, it's way beyond our control. But this is almost every year, and we can expect it, and people are getting face masks ready the month June, July, August. So if it's so systematic, then what's the response? What's the right to health issue? Every government has to pay the price. Business can't work. Schools close. So it's not just an environmental point of view, it's also exploitation, because the economic model, who starts the burning, and then why the burning gets out of control, and all the big business who have hundreds and thousands of acres of oil palm in Indonesia, maybe some parts of Sarawak or Kalimantan, also uses the same method. Easiest way to clear your land is burn, So
and that's cheaper.
Of course. So that is not tackled, and we're wondering how come the list of countries who have been burning the last 10 years have not been put up on a master list because they involve investors from Malaysia,
Right.
Singapore, maybe a few other countries, including Indonesia.
Indonesia, for sure.
But my question to Indonesia is, Indonesia is a democratic country that has rule of law. Use the rule of law and take them to court and punish them and close down the operations. Why aren't they doing that?
It may sound very easy, but it's still a big question because perhaps it's politically involved or the oldest engagement with other organizations.
Probably you're right, and I think at the back of their hand is also money.
For sure.
We need that commodity because Indonesia, I think, the biggest exporter of oil palm, and Malaysia is like almost the same, second or first. So this is an important money maker for the country. So
sure.
yeah, but the point is that if you don't handle it, hundreds of thousands will get sick, and you start calculating your health bill, that will increase by a few hundred million. So either way, you need to address the issue. And why did Indonesia wait so long to ask for help? If it knew it doesn't have the capacity, many other countries, the first instance of crisis, they would have cried out for help. What was Indonesia doing for a few weeks? Just using stick and sort of bucket water. You can't stop such big fires when you don't have the equipment. And then only recently, Jokowi 2 weeks ago sought for help. So well, good for him. And now he's promised to take those people who have burned to court. But we have to see. So maybe that one gentleman who took a court case of 150 million. Yeah. No, but I think those are the list of human rights issues that we are concerned about. So the list can go on. My point is, where do we situate this list of human rights in ASEAN? Because many of these issues are our own issues in Malaysia, as I mentioned. So the civil society here and many people have been demanding, for an example, free and fair elections, stop death in custody, stop arrest of those who have been arrested under SOSMA and sedition. So that's our Malaysian problem. But now you're asking in ASEAN, it also becomes an ASEAN problem because this doesn't comply with a people-centered, people-centric ASEAN.
Yes.
Yeah. So what can ASEAN do or not do? And sadly, most of the time, it's not do. The governments keep quiet because that is not my business. It's internal matters of another country, and they have non-interference policy and consensus. So where do you go to cry out for help if you cannot get support and help in your own country? Is AISHA, the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission for Human Rights, our hope?
What's their commitment? How engagement in terms of when it comes to human rights?
Actually, AISHA doesn't yet have a mechanism for protection.
Right.
And that's sad. Although it's in mandate, the word protection is there. I mean, for those who are not familiar, human rights have both parts. One is promotion, which you speak about and educate and tell people you have rights. But the more important part is a protection mandate, that when something is wrong, you can go somewhere to seek remedy and help. So that's the part that is missing. Like Suhakam now, a Malaysian Human Rights Commission. When you go to Suhakam, you can actually hope for Suhakam to take up your case seriously. They can investigate, they can make recommendation, they can come to conclusion, they can speak about it. So you feel, wow, they actually
doing something.
Yeah, they call you and sit with you and send officers. They even do inquiries, and they can subpoena the highest official. Technically, they can subpoena the Prime Minister if they want, because they have the power. But those small parts, we're still not happy with Suhakam that it doesn't have the prosecutorial power or something. But yet, even that components of Suhakam is not in AISHA. So if now I want to send a complaint about maybe death in custody in Malaysia, there is no email to send to. There is no mechanism I can log in my case. So that's why AISHA has been a talk shop. It has so many meetings. It discusses. It comes out with some report. I think it recently came out the report on human rights and CSR.
Okay.
So it does this forums, colloquiums, discussion, promotion. But it hasn't moved to the next level of protection.
Right.
But in the interim, it doesn't even have a space to discuss or talk with civil society. So if just say an indigenous group from Malaysia, an Orang Asli group, wants to take up, explain to them about the land exploitation
Uh-huh.
of their, because they've lost the court cases and whatever. This group has nowhere to go or no one to where to meet, because they are civil society, a people's group. Because ASEAN Human Rights Commission had not had a framework for engagement of CSOs for the last 6 years. They
Wow.
took 6 years to come up with a framework for engagement. Only earlier this year they have finally released their report on how they're going to engage with CSOs. So for me is like, if you are seriously a Human Rights Commission, on week 2 of your existence you would say, come talk to me. But it took you 6 years
Yeah.
to come up with the framework, and basically it just says that Aisha now wants to accredit CSOs to their organization before they allow you to
Hello.
talk to them. So we are asking, is it another layer of keep controlling, managing the groups? I mean, what's the difference if any group comes to you? Why you need accreditation? Because ASEAN already has some accreditation process, and why can't your groups who come in self-accredit at the point of the complaint? You know?
Right.
So they just launched on the website. I think you can check. You have to apply, answer many questions about the organization, give your financial background, everything, to a committee in Aisha, and then they will notify you if you are accredited. If you're accredited, then I think you get invited. You can submit some information. We're not sure; it's new, you know?
Right.
But that's how slow Aisha has been. It took 6 years for
The
them to
whole
be here.
procedure, it seems a bit long, and it's too formal. When you have issues, you just go to certain organization directly and just raise issue. It shouldn't be that difficult. Perhaps because of all this procedure and the steps that we have to take, it's been delayed and postponed, that the issue is not been heard. Perhaps the immediate reaction wasn't there. But talking about the ASEAN Summit, right, which is coming up very soon. What is People's Forum's slot or space in ASEAN Summit, and then where people can go and find about this forum?
Okay. Just on the ASEAN Summit, before I move to that, just one more information
Sure.
for you and for the listeners is Aisha appoints one person per country,
Yep.
and that appointment the name is ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission. So it's not
Okay.
independent,
Right.
it's intergovernmental.
Intergovernment, yeah.
So every country appoints one commission. So Malaysia's Commissioner is Tan Sri Shafi, and his term ends end of this year. So there is now a process of choosing a new person. So sadly, even the process of how one is selected is not open
Right.
for a nomination process. So Indonesia and Thailand has an open process where you can submit names and discussion. But I think no other country does that, no? So even the process needs to improve, and the question of this person represents the government, or actually represents the people of ASEAN, as the mandate of ASEAN Charter speaks about the people of ASEAN. So has Tan Sri Shafi actually taken the concerns of Malaysian people when he discusses matters in Aisha, or he's only taken the view of the government of the day?
Right.
So I think that needs to change if it wants to be an independent one. So moving on from there then to the summit. This every year there are 2 summits in ASEAN. So the next summit is coming up, I think it's 18 to 22nd, around that period of November. So civil society, I think for the first time, has decided to have a conference. The last ASEAN People's Forum in April, I think you were there. There was about 1,500 people, so that was a huge gathering. A good gathering, I would say. This time is smaller, maybe 150 people, more
Right.
conference style, 3 days. The reason being is that it's not that there is a space given to us or created for us, Summit 2 normally has no people, civil society programs in the sidelines. But we think that it's important civil society is there at every meeting, a big meeting of the ASEAN. And this year, more symbolically, ASEAN is going to launch the ASEAN community,
Right.
whatever it means, and the post-2015 ASEAN vision, community vision. All these are very important frameworks that will be launched for all of us in ASEAN. And we are worried while looking forward for something good to come up. And so we want to be there at the space of this summit in order to find out, to dialogue, to talk, and to also react, of course, to these two main documents that come out. The third part, the reason we want to be here is that I think in the beginning of the show you asked, have they been listening? Is it statements? What's happened to it? And that's our question we asked when we launched ourselves in preparation for the People's Forum this year. This is the 10th year of the interaction between the civil society of ASEAN with the summit. So it's been 10 years. 10 years ago, it was the first time was in Malaysia. Symbolically, it's back in Malaysia. So after 10 years of engagement, you get tired or you get encouraged and empowered. So we need to review the actual power, potential, and analysis. What has this statements and interaction with government meant? If it's symbolic, maybe it's too much of time, resources wasted. If it proves that the potentials outweigh its slow movement, we need to review. So we're also using this space to start discussing how we are going to evaluate ourselves and make decisions also about the future engagement with the ASEAN. So that's part of this 3-day conference, which is on 17th to 19th of November. 17th to 19th November at Swiss Garden Hotel. So 150 CSOs from the region, 11 countries. For the People's Forum, it's 10 plus 1. 10 ASEAN countries plus Timor-Leste.
Which the country is expected to become one of ASEAN already. So
we've already accepted them a few years ago. So
that's a step forward already.
So the summit will have, but the formal summit has not invited civil society for any part. And that's something I feel is really not coherent with its declaration of a people-centered ASEAN. I would have expected to have got the invitations for maybe the representatives of civil society from the 11 countries already now, but we are 2 weeks away and nothing has come through, So I'm wondering why you should be wanting to invite us for opening, the dinner, at least the spaces where you can dialogue. But of course, we have already written in to the Foreign Minister of Malaysia for a dialogue as the chair of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers for a dialogue with us. We've been trying it for this whole year.
So you haven't received any response yet?
For this third one, we're still waiting. But the first two, we started in the beginning of the year. Then even during the ASEAN ministerial meeting, we've been trying to ask, but he says that it's difficult, he's busy. ASEAN ministers, are not comfortable. So we said, okay, we want to meet you as a Malaysian foreign minister. So again, I'm hoping that you cannot put it on paper that you're people-centric. If you don't want to sit and meet and have engagement with your own people. So I think this summit has yet again proven that there's no real spaces for interaction with civil society, either by participation or even side events for some dialogue processes. And we know that this summit is a very multi-level summit because there's so many summits,
happening.
There's 8 head of states coming, a UN Secretary General is coming. So we're also hoping to have dialogue with some of these big personalities. We've sent out invites as Civil Society of ASEAN to meet the head of states. So we are hoping that they won't shy away and say that they're too busy. We know everybody is busy, but commitment is shown when you make time for your own people. So we've sent an invite to the Sec-Gen of UN, Ban Ki-moon, US head of state, China, India. So we've sent it to all and seriously hoping that at least some of them will take us seriously and want to sit down and talk with us.
Right, Jerald. All the best with your work and all the civil society activities and work, especially for this ASEAN Summit.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we have to stop here. But thank you so much for coming over and share your thoughts and experience.
Thanks for the invite.
You're welcome.
We are all people in ASEAN, so this project is ours.
Let's go for it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.